Perception is a part of our daily life, how we read objects around us, whether it is art or cars, how do we recognize or distinguish them, or even landmark architecture, how we perceive it matters. Our perception shapes our worldview. Advertising, media, storytelling, and other marketing tools often shape our perception of the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, a large part of our experiential framework is shaped by our built environment, the spaces we inhabit, work in, learn in, and occupy for leisure. These are the spaces that make up our buildings and cities. Unlike the other arts, painting, sculpture, music, or theater, experiencing architecture is not a choice. It's not something we decide to take or leave. Whether by choice or by not, we are interacting with space and buildings all the time. In the daily rut of life, we experience spaces without pausing to read the building story. And architecture remains largely experienced, but unspoken and undocumented. Victor Hugo famously said, "The city is a writing, and we, the users of the city, are the readers." However, the stuff we read does not care about the built environment. Architecture itself, being in the news, is a rare moment in time and most often stays within the closed confines of design media, which is read mostly by other designers and rarely outside this professional echo chamber. Globally, there are around 15,000 newspapers and 1,400 design magazines and multiple awards, events, and shows that are all attended by other designers, design brands, consultants, and professionals from the same domain. Unlike other professionals that have mass engagement, as architects or interior designers or engineers, apart from clients, we only talk to other architects, other interior designers, and consultants. While data shows that spaces impact our well-being and mental health, buildings are rarely ever sold to us, unless it's real estate. We are never told why buildings are important. Who was the architect? What was the design intent? Why is a building made a certain way? Unless when we're told to look, that's the World Trade Center. Look, that's the Guggenheim. And look, that's the Taj Mahal. Not all architecture is by star architects or the masters, and therefore it is not packaged and sold to us as wow architecture. The building next door, the home next door, the school next door, the office next door is seldom understood or even talked about. We keep complaining about the state of our cities and the pitiful state of our built environment. But as professionals, as designers, we do not engage in a discourse with the society. Who has the time to listen, to write, to talk, or even read about architecture or buildings? We care about the building, but never its story. Over 50% of the world's population now lives in cities, making city building one of the most critical tasks and responsibilities of our age. The construction industry contributes to over 30% of greenhouse emissions annually. Buildings contribute to about 40% of our total energy consumption. Cities are not made from iconic buildings, but instead from the many high-quality buildings, big and small, working in tandem, and that is the design that we must celebrate. Like any successful person at the top of their game, star architects are the ones who are seen, heard, and known. Critics line up to visit their buildings and inform the public of their brilliance, casting a slew of opinions. The greatest victims of this influence are students who grow up fantasizing about an imaginary utopia consisting of signature buildings. Often it takes excessive design to get noticed, or sometimes the death of a building brings it into conversation. The art world has it fairly sorted, where process finds a place in the narrative. Architects, however, rarely find themselves in museums and occasionally get noticed in public buildings. And when they do, it is almost always after being long gone. And so, the dialogue today must be shaped around the bulk of the architecture and not just the iconic gherkins of the world. Rather than allowing a few icon makers to usurp the architectural agenda, it is important that as architects we write our own history. Those engaging in making the places we inhabit 99% of the time don't even talk about it, and hence do not get talked about as a consequence. Designers do themselves great injustice, and perhaps even greater injustice, towards their customers by not talking about their work. And all this talking is not to be known. Like Michael Jackson said, it is for you and for me and for the entire human race. So what Solution. Architecture has long prided itself in storytelling through purely visual tools, imagery, diagrammatics, and so much more. It has overlooked the potential that words hold in creating meaning and enabling an engaging discourse. Public buildings and landmarks get recognized through a plaque. You would have seen them all around. Some cities respect the heritage and the architect, but the local humble building rarely gets seen for what it is and what it was supposed to be. For example, the Intopia building in the UK, the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, is a world first for a retrofitted sustainable office building, setting new standards for low energy use, carbon emission, and so much more. But nobody's ever heard about it. In a world where content is driven by Instagram and LinkedIn algorithms, originality and creativity are lost in the deluge of data. The masters get their due credit, but the local humble building stays unknown. Now imagine the city to be an art gallery where every building comes with descriptive text explaining the raison d'etre. This, however, is not possible. Buildings do not display or telecast their stories. And so, as designers, we must focus on who we are communicating to. Content and not the designer is king. And every design has its unique story. Frank Gehry very famously said, no matter how talented architecture students or architects may be, their gifts are of not much use if no one else knows about them. And therefore, in order to give architecture and design a distinct voice, a more inclusive voice, and a more accessible voice, could we, as architects, for a minute, become journalists and not magazine editors, and approach storytelling from a whole new perspective? Why don't we get ready to read and write about the built environment? Every building has a story and an identity. Tag it to know it, and go ahead and democratize it. Let's create a building story for every building we make. Thank you.